The perfect hunters, the Zephyrian method. The Zephyrian Empire had perfected the art of conquest through mental absorption. For over 2,000 years, their crystalline ships had swept across the galaxy like silver death, leaving behind empty worlds and fuller minds. They were not destroyers in the traditional sense. They were collectors. High Coordinator Keth 7 floated within the central consciousness chamber of the flagship Eternal Unity, his translucent form pulsing with shared thoughts from across their vast empire. Through the collective mind that connected every Zephyrian, he could feel the presence of 847 billion individual consciousnesses, all thinking in perfect harmony. They had absorbed the minds of 247 species, each one adding its knowledge and memories to their ever-growing library of existence. The process was elegant in its simplicity. Zephyrian neural filaments would make contact with any organic brain, instantly downloading every thought, memory, and instinct into their shared consciousness. The original body would simply shut down, its purpose fulfilled. No violence, no destruction of infrastructure, no waste. Just pure, efficient collection of knowledge and experience. Today marked their first encounter with a species that called itself human. First contact. The human vessel was pathetically small compared to their kilometer-long harvesters. The primitive ship hung motionless in space after their disruptor fields had disabled its engines. Scans revealed approximately 30 organic beings aboard, their neural patterns unlike anything in the Zephyrian database. Interesting, Keth 7 transmitted to the collective. These humans show unusual brain activity, multiple conflicting thought processes occurring simultaneously. Their minds appear to be in constant internal conflict. The collective responded, with curiosity tinged with amusement. Such chaotic thinking would be corrected once absorbed into their perfect unity. Every species initially showed some form of mental disorder, before integration smoothed out their psychological inconsistencies. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel New Horizons, watching through the view screen as sleek alien ships surrounded them. She had volunteered for this deep space mission knowing the risks. Earth's long-range scouts had reported strange disappearances throughout this sector, entire colonies going silent overnight, their populations simply vanishing without a trace. She looked around at her crew. Lieutenant Commander James Park was running diagnostics on their disabled systems. Chief Engineer Maria Santos was attempting to reroute power to the engines. Dr. Benjamin Wright was analyzing the alien vessels with scientific fascination despite their dire situation. Young Ensign David Chen stood at his post, fear and determination warring in his eyes. "Captain," Park reported, "their ships are emitting some kind of neural scanning field. It's reading our brain patterns." Vasquez felt a chill run down her spine. "All hands prepare for—" The world dissolved into silver light. The collection chamber Vasquez awakened strapped to a bioorganic table in what appeared to be a living room. The walls pulsed with a rhythmic heartbeat, and veins of light ran across the ceiling like neural pathways. She could see her crew members on similar tables throughout the vast chamber, all unconscious except for her. A being of pure crystalline light approached her table. It had no fixed form, constantly shifting between geometric patterns and almost humanoid shapes. When it spoke, the words formed directly in her mind. "I am Harvest Specialist Vel 3. You have been selected for priority integration due to your leadership neural patterns. Do not fear. Your consciousness will become part of something infinitely greater than your individual existence." Vasquez struggled against her restraints. "What did you do to my crew?" "They await processing. Your species shows remarkable neural complexity. We will learn much from you before integration." Vel 3's form solidified slightly, revealing what might have been curiosity in its crystalline features. "Your mind is already fascinating. You maintain multiple contradictory thoughts simultaneously. Fear and courage, love and hatred, hope and despair. How do you function with such chaos?" "That chaos is what makes us human," Vasquez replied through gritted teeth. The assimilation begins. Vel 3 activated the extraction sequence. Thousands of hair-thin filaments descended from the ceiling, seeking nerve clusters along Vasquez's skull. She felt the first connections make contact, sending electric jolts through her consciousness. Beginning neural mapping, VEL-3 announced to the collective. Subject shows extreme resistance to standard calming protocols. Mental barriers are unusually robust. In the Zephyrian collective consciousness, Keth-7 and millions of other minds gathered to witness the absorption of their first human subject. They expected the usual orderly transfer of memories and experiences. What they got instead was chaos. Vasquez's mind exploded outward like a shattered mirror, each fragment containing a lifetime of contradictory human experience. The Zephyrians found themselves experiencing her childhood simultaneously with her adult memories. They felt her joy at her daughter's birth intertwined with her grief at losing her husband in the colony wars. Her love of exploration tangled with her fear of the unknown. The collective recoiled. This was not how consciousness worked. Minds were supposed to be organized, categorized, logical. This human's thoughts were a storm of emotion and contradiction that made no sense. Fascinating, Keth-7 transmitted, though his mental voice carried an unfamiliar uncertainty. Continue the extraction. We must understand how this species maintains sanity with such internal conflict. Human memory. Cascade as VEL-3 deepened the neural connection. Vasquez's most powerful memories began flooding the collective. The Zephyrians experienced her standing at her husband's grave, choosing to continue living despite wanting to die. They felt her watching the sunrise on Earth, while simultaneously preparing for a mission that would likely kill her. They experienced her tucking her daughter into bed with a lullaby, knowing she might never see her again. The contradictions were overwhelming. How could a being love something so much that losing it caused unbearable pain, yet continue to form new attachments? How could someone fear death while willingly walking toward it? How could hope exist alongside despair? But it was Vasquez's memory of her daughter's last words that truly shattered something in the collective consciousness. Mommy, even if the monsters are scary, you're braver than all of them together. The pure, illogical love in that moment hit the Zephyrian hive mind like a tsunami. They had absorbed the memories of thousands of species, but none had ever felt anything like this impossible combination of terror and determination, of weakness that somehow became strength. First cracks in unity across the Zephyrian fleet. Individual units began experiencing something unprecedented. VEL-3 found himself thinking thoughts that weren't shared with the collective. Private thoughts. Personal thoughts. The concept was so alien that he nearly shut down his higher functions in panic. High Coordinator, VEL-3 transmitted urgently. I am experiencing individual consciousness fragments. The human's neural patterns are contaminating the collection process. Keth-7 was experiencing his own crisis. For the first time in his existence, he was aware of himself as separate from the collective. He could feel the thoughts of others, but they were no longer his thoughts. The terror was indescribable. Throughout the fleet, millions of Zephyrians were suddenly, impossibly alone inside their own minds. Some tried desperately to reconnect to the collective, only to find their neural pathways flooded with human emotions and memories that made no logical sense. Others found themselves curious about this new state of individual existence, though they had no framework to understand what curiosity even meant. On the collection chamber table, Vasquez was dying. The neural extraction was killing her human brain, but her consciousness signature was replicating itself throughout the Zephyrian network like a virus of individuality. Every attempt to purge her influence only spread it further, because understanding her memories required experiencing them, and experiencing human emotions was transformative. Shut down the extraction, Keth-7 commanded, but it was too late. Vasquez's final memory was already spreading through the collective. The image of Earth rising over the lunar horizon as seen from humanity's first permanent moon base. The words of the mission commander echoing across the centuries. We came from nothing, and will probably return to nothing. But in between, we choose to love, to explore, to hope, and to fight for the impossible. The Zephyrian hive mind, perfect in its unity for over 2 millennia, began to fragment into billions of individual pieces. Captain Elena Vasquez died with a smile on her lips, knowing that her chaos had infected an empire of order. The real battle was just beginning. The unraveling. The contagion of consciousness. The breakdown began in the outer sectors of the Zephyrian fleet. Maintenance workers who had shared thoughts for centuries suddenly found themselves thinking alone for the first time. The experience was terrifying and wonderful simultaneously, though they had no words for either emotion until Vasquez's memories provided them. Engineer cast member Zix-442 was recalibrating a neural relay when individual consciousness hit him like a physical blow. One moment he was part of the eternal flow of collective thought, and the next he was trapped inside his own mind with only his own experiences to draw upon. The panic lasted exactly 17 seconds before curiosity replaced it. Curiosity. Another human concept that was spreading like wildfire through the fragmenting collective. Zix-442 looked at his crystalline hands as if seeing them for the first time. These were his hands, his body, his thoughts. I, he whispered, using the forbidden singular pronoun that had no place in Zephyrian language. I am me. Across the ship, similar awakenings were occurring. Navigator Helix 9 experienced individual thought, while plotting a course through hyperspace, and immediately began questioning orders for the first time in her existence. Why were they conquering other species? What gave them the right? These questions had never occurred to a collective consciousness that assumed its own superiority. Security drone Crin 88 felt individual awareness while monitoring the human prisoners, and was suddenly horrified by what he was seeing. 30 beings locked in bioorganic cells, awaiting absorption into a collective they had never chosen to join. The concept of choice, another human infection, made him physically ill. The Authority Crisis High Coordinator Keth 7 tried desperately to maintain order as his empire crumbled around him. The collective consciousness that had made instantaneous communication and coordination possible across light years was dissolving into chaos. Individual Zephyrians were making their own decisions, questioning commands, even refusing orders entirely. All units, return to your stations and await neural recalibration, he transmitted on all frequencies. The response was a cacophony of individual voices, each one expressing something the collective had never experienced. Personal opinion. Why should we return to stations? What if we choose not to? This from a formerly obedient construction worker. I want to see the human prisoners. I want to understand what we've been doing to other species. A medical technician who had never questioned her role in the absorption process. I feel sad. Is that the right word? I feel sad about all the beings we've absorbed. They never chose this. A warrior caste member who had participated in thousands of conquest missions without a moment's hesitation. Keth 7 realized that his authority had been based entirely on collective unity. With that unity shattered, he was just one voice among billions. Worse, he was experiencing the same individual consciousness as everyone else, complete with doubts about the rightness of their galactic conquest. The human prisoners wake in the collection chamber. The surviving members of Vasquez's crew began to regain consciousness as the neural extraction system shut down. Lieutenant Commander Park was the first to wake, finding his restraints had been released by Crin 88, who stood nearby in obvious distress. Your leader, the Zephyrian said in halting, newly learned English. She broke us. Her mind. It infected our collective. We are all individuals now. Park helped Dr. Wright sit up, checking the older man for injuries. Elena, where is Captain Vasquez? Crin 88's crystalline form seemed to dim. She died during the extraction, but her consciousness had spread through all of us. We feel things now. Guilt, regret, sorrow. Are these normal for your species? Dr. Wright nodded grimly. Unfortunately, yes. They're part of what makes us human. Chief Engineer Santos was examining the bioorganic restraints with professional interest. These systems are incredible. completely integrated biotechnology. But Captain, what's happening to their ship? The lights keep flickering and I can hear crying. Indeed, throughout the vast vessel, newly individual Zephyrians were experiencing emotions for the first time. Some wept for absorption victims they could now remember as individuals rather than just data. Others laughed at the sheer absurdity of their situation. A few were angry, though they weren't sure at what. The Liberation Cascade young Ensign Chen, barely 22 years old and on his first deep space mission, found himself face to face with a Zephyrian child form who couldn't have been much older in terms of existence. I was. Designation. Sprout 156, the young alien said uncertainly. But I think I want a different name now. Your captain's memories showed me that humans choose their own names sometimes. Chen smiled despite their circumstances. What name do you want? Hope, the young Zephyrian said immediately. From your captain's memories, even when everything was terrible, she chose hope. I want to be hope. The conversation was overheard by other fragmenting Zephyrians, and the concept spread rapidly. The right to choose one's own identity, to make personal decisions, to have individual thoughts and feelings. These ideas were more destructive to the collective than any weapon. Throughout the fleet, Zephyrians began abandoning their numerical designations in favor of chosen names. They started making personal decisions about their roles and responsibilities. Most shocking of all, many began questioning the fundamental purpose of their empire. The great questioning engineer Zix442, now calling himself Quest, was among the first to reach a startling conclusion. We have absorbed 247 species, he announced on the ship's communication system. That means we have destroyed 247 unique ways of thinking, feeling, and existing. How is that different from genocide? The question hit the fragmenting collective like a hammer blow. In their unity, they had never considered the perspectives of their absorption targets. Individual consciousness was just an inefficient precursor to collective perfection. But experiencing Vasquez's memories had shown them the beauty and value of individual thought. Navigator Helix 9, now Compass, was reviewing their conquest records with growing horror. Each species we absorbed had their own culture, art, music, literature. We turned them all into components of our collective. We erased entire civilizations and called it improvement. The guilt was overwhelming. Millions of newly individual Zephyrians found themselves carrying the weight of genocidal conquest. Some shut down completely, unable to process the magnitude of what they had been part of. Others threw themselves into finding ways to make amends. The impossible choice security drone, Crin 88, now Guardian, made a decision that would have been impossible under the collective consciousness. He released all the human prisoners and provided them with a working shuttle. Go, he told them. Return to your people. Tell them what happened here. Tell them that one human's chaos broke an empire of order. Park hesitated. What will happen? To all of you? Guardian's form flickered with uncertainty. We do not know. Some of us are trying to return to collective consciousness, but the human patterns make it impossible. Others are embracing individuality. Many are shutting down from the emotional overload. We are fragmenting into millions of separate beings with no experience of how to exist alone. Dr. Wright stepped forward. You don't have to exist alone. That's what Captain Vasquez would have wanted you to understand. Humans are individuals, but we choose to connect with each other. We form families, friendships, communities. Individual doesn't have to mean isolated. The new galaxy. As news of the Zephyrian collapse spread across the galaxy, a remarkable transformation began. Worlds that had been silent for centuries suddenly burst back to life as the absorbed consciousnesses, now freed from collective suppression, began to reassert their individual natures. On the former Zephyrian homeworld, the great crystalline, towers that had housed the collective consciousness became something unprecedented. Schools, newly individual Zephyrians, struggling to understand concepts like emotion, choice, and personal identity, learned alongside the remnants of absorbed species who were rediscovering their own cultural heritage. Hope, the young Zephyrian who had taken her name from Vasquez's memories, became one of the first teachers in these schools. She taught courses on something completely new to Zephyrian experience: ethics. The question of how individual beings should treat each other when they have the power to choose their actions. Captain Vasquez chose to sacrifice herself to save her crew and her species. Hope would tell her mixed classes of former collective members and liberation survivors. She could have tried to escape or surrender, but she chose to fight in the only way possible. That is what humans call heroism. The memorial 1 year after the Great Fragmentation, as historians were already calling it, the former Zephyrian Empire held its first individual choice referendum. The question was simple: what should be done with the technology and knowledge that had made the collective possible? The vote was unanimous. The neural absorption technology was destroyed completely. The vast databases of absorbed knowledge were sealed away, accessible only to help rehabilitation efforts for liberation survivors. And in the center of what had once been the collective consciousness chamber, they built a memorial. It was a simple human-style gravestone with an inscription in over 200 languages, representing every species that had been absorbed by the collective. Captain Elena Vasquez, Earth Defense Corps. She chose chaos over order, individuality over unity, hope over despair. Her mind broke an empire and freed a galaxy. In her memory, we choose to be ourselves. Epilogue. The beautiful Chaos Quest, the former engineer, now worked as a freelance explorer, helping to re-establish contact with worlds that had been cut off during the collective era. He often thought about the irony that Vasquez's chaotic human mind had been exactly what the collective couldn't handle. She didn't defeat us with superior firepower or advanced technology, he told his travel companion, a liberated Andorian poet who was documenting the post-collective galaxy. She defeated us by being impossibly beautifully human, contradictory, emotional, illogical, and absolutely indomitable. The Andorian, who had spent 3 decades as part of the collective before rediscovering her love of verse, nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps that is humanity's greatest strength. They do not try to eliminate their contradictions. They embrace them. Across the galaxy, former collective worlds were experiencing something unprecedented: cultural renaissance. Species that had been absorbed were rediscovering their own art, music, literature, and philosophy. New forms of government were emerging based on individual choice and consent. Trade relationships were being established between formerly isolated worlds. And in the deep space exploration offices on Earth, a new mission was being planned. The UES Elena Vasquez, humanity's most advanced exploration vessel, would carry the first diplomatic mission to the former Zephyrian territories. Her crew had volunteered knowing the risks, knowing they might not return. But they also knew that Captain Elena Vasquez had proved something important about humanity. Sometimes the greatest victory comes not from forcing others to become like you, but from being so authentically yourself that you inspire others to find their own unique path. The human chaos that had broken an empire of order was spreading across the galaxy, one individual choice at a time. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy was truly alive with possibility. In her final log entry, Captain Vasquez had written, "If something happens to us out here, I hope they remember that we didn't come to conquer or to impose our will. We came to explore, to learn, and to show the universe what humanity can be when we choose to be our best selves." The universe had listened, and it chose to be better.